Hello, everybody. Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report, Thursday's edition. And as usual, folks, we've got a lot of interesting things to talk about today. First and foremost, I want to welcome our Thursday guest, Andrew Gruel. Welcome to the Schaftlein Report. Happy to have you as a guest today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Andrew, you're a restaurant entrepreneur. You have multiple businesses in different parts of the country. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your businesses, and then we can get into some of the topics of the day that the administration inadvertently has hoisted upon us.
Great. Thank you so much for the platform. So I started Slapfish was my first concept. I started as a food truck back in 2011 here in Orange County. And then I grew that to 4 food trucks and then opened my first brick and mortar in 2012. We now have 27 locations nationwide, 7 here in Southern California, and we franchise out the rest of the country. And then I've got a couple other concepts I started. I've got a chicken concept, a pizza concept here in Orange County as well. And, really just growing the brands. I'm a chef by trade. Dishwasher is my, regular job. And I'm a father. I've got 4 kids. And that's me in a nutshell.
Well, tell us that's like an American success story. Okay, so I mean, you've been doing it a while. You've built up your business. Now you're in multiple states. Wow, that is a very impressive story. So let me ask you this, Andrew. Okay, so you're a successful restaurant entrepreneur. Okay, we've been hearing stories throughout all across the country how difficult it is to find workers. And you just mentioned you're the dishwasher. You own the joint. Okay. How true is this? And are you experiencing some of the same issues that other entrepreneurs and business owners around the country are experiencing?
Certainly. The issue is a real issue. It's very difficult right now to find labor, but I would need to specify too. What I've noticed is it's entry-level labor, right? So and that's of course given the threshold with a lot of the unemployment benefits, where I think people are making this cost benefit analysis and they're saying, okay, well, if I can make the same, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more than I was making on unemployment, well, I'm going to continue to see this thing through and not re-enter the workforce. Now, it's important to mention the people I'm talking to, they're not these aren't lazy people. They're not doing it because they're lazy. They're doing it in many cases because they want to utilize this time in order to educate themselves. Perhaps they have children and their kids can't go back to school because the schools are shut down. So they have to make the choice between, do I work and pay somebody for childcare, or do I just watch my kids? I would watch my kids. And then the third piece of this is a lot of people who are entering the workforce for the first time, getting these traditionally entry-level jobs, are saying, well, the restaurant has been vilified and it's a really hostile environment right now between the customers and the masks and people saying that restaurants are the epicenters of spread. And they're saying, I'm just going to go work apparel or retail, some other retail environment. So I think there's a lot of factors that are making it difficult right now. And in places like California, the unemployment benefits are certainly one factor in that equation.
How much are the state unemployment benefits in California, Andrew?
Well, you can make, let me see, I think now it's upwards of $900 total you can take home with the state and federal benefits.
Is that per week?
Per week, yeah.
Per week. So you're talking 3,600. You're talking, so probably 600 in the state of California, 300 federal. Yep. That's how you get up to the 900. So you're talking 30. That's even higher than I thought, because we had calculated that basically the break-even point was around $32,000 a year, which basically equates out to about $15 an hour, 40-hour work week. But if they're getting $900 a week, $3,600 a month, then now you're talking close to $44,000 a year to not work.
Yeah, I mean, and look, it's a real tough situation right now. The natural response, of course, on behalf of employers like myself is we are significantly increasing wages that are being offered. Now, mind you, we were already offering about $16 to $20 an hour base here in Southern California, plus tips, plus benefits, plus bonuses. It really works out to be a lot more when you fold in some of those auxiliary benefits. But we've now upped it to $20, $25 an hour to start. We've given our entire labor pool a significant increase in wages to catch up to that. So is wage inflation going to occur coming out of this? I mean, I'm not an economist, but it's certainly something to point towards when you look at how this is playing out.
Well, if you're paying $20 an hour and they're 40-hour, if you're talking about a standard 40-hour work week, okay, that's $800 a week right there. You know what? You're just getting to a point, Andrew, where you're competitive with what the unemployment's getting. And you know, you make a good analysis there. The first of all, it's a false vilification that the restaurants are spreader events. I mean, every restaurant I've been to on multiple states since the pandemic, I go in, they're extra cautious about cleaning the environment, the cooks, the serve. I mean, these places, and again, I've traveled frequently, Andrew, these restaurant owners go out of their way to make the customers feel safe and secure and have a good dining experience.
Yeah.
So, I mean, isn't that vilification just wrong, flat out wrong?
Yeah, and I've said that from the very beginning, is that restaurants are inherently trained to create safe and sanitary environments. We had much of these protocols in place prior to the pandemic based on, you know, our sanitation procedures, protocols, safety measures, working with the health department. So when it comes to, you know, sanitizing surfaces and maintaining these certain, you know, social distancing standards, et cetera, we've already done that. We've been very sensitive to flu season in the past. We've been sensitive to, obviously, any transfer of foodborne illness, norovirus, et cetera. And it's been a hot topic, I think, over the past 5 years anyways in the food service industry, between a lot of the E. coli spread, some of the Chipotle issues. So for restaurants, we always take this very seriously. And I said from the beginning, we should have been used as a vehicle through which the government can work with private businesses to model the right types of behavior while simultaneously exhibiting that businesses can continue to operate. But instead, we were vilified, we were shut down, we were targeted, and that is going to have a long-lasting effect on the consumer psychology for years to come.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, because a lot of friends of mine own restaurants here in Southern California, and I mean, it became problematic. I mean, just surviving this was difficult at best for some of them. As you're well aware, 20% of all restaurants have permanently closed their doors since the pandemic?
Yeah. And, you know, I would be remiss not to mention perhaps there was a surplus going into the pandemic. I'd said that for years, but 20% is a massive number, right? And when I say surplus, maybe 1 or 2%. So I'm kind of hedging against what somebody would argue against us when we talk about that 20% number. And, you know, what effect is that going to have? So one of two things are going to happen. All of those second generation restaurant spots are going to be backfilled by large multi-unit corporations, really taking away some of the charm of Main Street, if you will. And or landlords are just going to end up wiping that space out, and it's going to be left for who knows what. And then you're going to see that financial hardship start to migrate up the chain of custody into the commercial real estate space. And I don't even think that's been talked about yet, because a lot of money has been pumped into that commercial real estate space. But I think that's the next, just mark my words here, that could be the next little mini crisis.
It absolutely could be another domino to fall, because in certain big cities, you've already seen vacancy rates just skyrocketing. Yeah. And then when you look at some of these policies that have happened in these cities, you see buildings boarded up. No, not in Huntington Beach, but I mean, you're in metropolitan areas across the country, restaurant owners within the cities are having an extremely difficult time.
Yep.
Specifically, we talked to some in New York City. Specifically, we had a guest on our show on Monday who was talking about that and how his restaurant was shut down. I mean, it's really affected a lot of people. And let me come back to something that you said a little bit earlier, just focusing on the economics of owning a restaurant. Okay. If you're up to $20 an hour for entry level work, okay, so obviously everybody on the left who champions $15 an hour, you're their hero right now. I mean,
well, no, I'm not. No, I'm not.
Really? Tell me why. Because
I'm vilified. I was on Ingram a couple weeks ago talking about the labor shortage, and I got completely taken out by the left on social media for not paying a living wage.
But you're paying $20 an hour. What?
They say that that's not a living wage.
$20 an hour. Let me do some quick math here, folks. Okay, that's $800 a week, 50 weeks out of the year. You're talking $40,000+ a year.
Well, what's really interesting is that, look, I always want to learn. So I addressed a lot of these complaints, the ones that are kind of more ad hominem and just insults I ignore, but I did speak with some experts in the field, and there is a lot of data right now that's produced about a living wage, right? What are these living wage numbers? And it's very difficult to pin one down because the variables when it comes to calculating a living wage take into consideration things like, are you a single parent? How many kids do you have? Is it dual parents working? So as I look at these numbers, the living wage in Southern California, this market, it ranges between like $16 an hour and $45 an hour. And that's based upon how many kids you have and whether you're married and whether it's a dual income household. But,
Sure.
The argument on my behalf against that is, well, then am I going to discriminate by trying to only hire people who are single with no kids?
Right. I mean, you can't do that. I mean,
Yeah, because the living wage in that regard is like $17.25 an hour versus $36 an hour for somebody who's single parent with two kids.
But the thing about this, Andrew, what the people on the left don't understand, these entry-level wages were not designed to support a family. I mean, entry-level wages are for to get young people into the workforce, understand the value of work, being able to teach responsibility. I mean, I don't think anyone over the last 40 years expected they could raise a family on an entry-level job. I mean, am I missing something here, or give us some feedback on that?
I don't know. I mean, like I said, I'm just a dishwasher, but but what I find very curious, right? And I'll throw this out there as more of just a mental riddle. On the one hand, we're saying people aren't coming back to work because they're making enough on unemployment. And then the argument is, well, pay your workers more and they'll come back to work, right? But if they're able to live on the unemployment numbers, which are less than they were making when they were working, then theoretically, wouldn't that be a living wage?
Well, it would be, but I'm going to correct you on one thing. You're paying people 20. Okay, let's use your 20 as an example. It's still $5 above what the goal of 15 is. I got to tell you what, in my home state of Florida, if you're paying $20 an hour in a restaurant, you wouldn't be in business. But anyhow, it's another topic for another day. At $20 an hour, again, 40 hours a week. Okay, that's $800 a week. That's $42,000 a year. Okay. Now, if they're getting $900 a week, $600 from the state of California, $300 federal. Oh, by the way, the federal is going to end in September, so maybe some sanity will come back to this industry, starting in September when federal benefits fall off. But if someone's getting $900, and again, I'm not begrudging someone. If someone goes to work and they're making $800 versus staying at home, taking care of everything they got to take care of, and they're getting paid $900, look. Some entrepreneurial people that want to work, do good for the company, grow, build in another position, they'll take the job. But from some people who maybe have, as you said, their kids can't go to school, there could be other factors. I'm not going to blame them. I'll tell you who I blame. I blame the government for putting too high of an unemployment benefit out there. It was fine during the pandemic, but coming out of the pandemic, we need to get workers back into the economy. And you're probably looking for a lot of workers right now.
Yeah. Well, I think that in general, the frustrating piece as a small business owner is that for months and months and months, both businesses and a lot of their workers were ignored by the government, and they were forced to shut down and they weren't allowed to operate. If I'm being told I cannot operate and I have to shut down, well, then I should be subsidized for all of that money, regardless, whether it's the government, whether it's a landlord telling me to close. If they're going to paint the parking lot and I have to close, the landlord should backfill my lost revenue, right? And that's also parts of insurance policies. If there's some incident that occurs, then the insurance policy will cover your lost revenue. It's a general principle that permeates various industries, both public and private. But in the circumstances here, where it's the federal government's responsibility to step in and really act as that, that's federalism, right? Now there's an emergency. They need to step in. These are the circumstances for which the government should be providing money. Everybody could probably agree to that, but they didn't in the beginning, right? And now they're picking winners and losers way, way, way towards the end of the pandemic, and they're using it pegged against certain social issues and certain debatable issues. These things should never be used as bait in a debate, right? It should be, and and that, because that divides people, and that's what's happening right now. The ways in which the money is being distributed is being pegged toward these divisive conversations, things like a living wage. We should have the living wage conversation. I'm not denying that. I certainly do think that it's a reasonable conversation and debate that has now permeated our culture, and we need to talk about it, but not in the conjunction of getting money from the government. The money should have been given out from day one. And even, if you recall, even towards the end of the Trump era, moving into the Biden era, it was about $2,000 stimulus checks. What did it end up working out to? It ended up getting trimmed down to like $1,000 of stimulus checks that was going out. It became a pawn, a political pawn. And it's really unfair, I think, to the everyday business owner, the everyday worker, the everyday citizen, that we're being used in this debate when realistically the majority of us, the lion's share, now that's not everybody, we all just kind of want to go about our business and let the market dictate how we should be acting and operating.
Talk to our audience about how we've heard all the stories about how the pandemic affected entrepreneurs, restaurant owners like yourself. I mean, describe for our viewing audience, how tough was it for you during the pandemic? How many did you have to close all of your restaurants and gradually reopen them? Give our viewers a sense of what you as a business owner had to deal with in multiple states, different laws, and dealing with this pandemic.
Well, my scenario is somewhat unique because we own multiple restaurants here in Southern California, right? They're all kind of independently owned, multi-member LLCs, and I own a lot of them with my wife. All of our life savings thrown into it, but then we've also licensed the brand into franchise locations around the U.S. We don't own those, we license them, so we control the IP, but those are all independent owner operators. So on the surface, it says, oh, Andrew Gruel owns 30 plus restaurants. Well, that's not really the case. The first restaurant that my wife and I opened, we had to shut down in the beginning of the pandemic. We got no PPP funding for it, and we're still getting hit with the bill from the Board of Equalization in regards to our sales tax. We have no money. It's totally bankrupt in that regard. So now we're, of course, having to dip into our personal savings. We did have to shut down a few of the Slapfish restaurants. We reopened them, but we're still limited in terms of the hours, and we've spent so much money. It's not about profiting right now. It's about trying to break even. That's the goal, because we've spent so much money on PPE, paper goods, outdoor patios, plexiglass, all of the necessary items to maintain a safe and sanitary environment. Government hasn't rebated us on any of that, nor did they provide any funding to put all of that stuff up. The local health departments haven't acted and worked alongside us. They've been deputized to be a policing agency for the state. So these local taxpayer-funded organizations that should be acting as our consultants have been turned against us, from the ABC to the Labor Commission to OSHA to the health department, to try and penalize people who perhaps step out, or even speak out for that matter, against some of these, arduous restrictions. Though that's the environment in which we're operating here in Southern California. And it's very prohibitive, and you're going to see all of these small businesses are going to go under.
It's really strange because, in certain states, they've got these quote, well, if you're a tenant, you don't have to pay rent. Washington State, New York State, probably parts of California too, where, the rent abatement piece.
Yep.
That does, it applies to people who are living in these rental communities, but it doesn't apply to business owners who were shut down by the government. The government made you shut down, and they didn't compensate you for it. For the most part. So there's a rub there. Now, are you sensing it's getting any better, or or do you still feel like, hey, I'm trying to hire people, I'm trying to get people back to a normal lifestyle, I'm an employer, and yet I'm being treated like, I'm the bad guy? Is that easing at any good, Andrew?
I think to some degree that's already been calcified in the minds of a subset of consumers in varying degrees in various areas. But small business owners are either now champions or they're the bad guys. You're right. And that's unfortunate, because small business owners are always the ones who take on the risk, they create jobs for people, and they grow the economy. 8 out of 10 people in the state of California have worked in the restaurant industry at one point or another. And a massive, if not majority, of our tax base does come from small business owners. The issue is that now, having been vilified, a lot of these, debates we're being targeted as anecdotal evidence of X, Y, or Z, and it's all about people over profits, etc. very unfair, very disingenuous arguments. But I will say this. I think right now, the big grand reopening that we're seeing, Newsom's obviously got heat on his tail, so he's very rapidly reopening things, reducing the mask mandates. It is changing it's changing the behavior here in Southern California, and it's created somewhat of a shock to the system, right? So now suddenly it's like, okay, we need all this labor and we need all this staff. What are we going to do with the benefits? What are we going to do with this? What are we going to do with that? You see, it's almost like we didn't, we reopened the pipes really quickly, which we needed to do, but they weren't ready for it. The state wasn't ready for it. The businesses were ready for it, but the state wasn't ready for it. So I think that it'll ultimately distill into a level of normalcy, nowhere near where it was before. I think that there's opportunities here. Don't get me wrong. Inside every negative, there's a ton of opportunities. You're going to see second generation real estate. Now is actually a great time for somebody to get into the restaurant industry if they were always worried about it. Go into it eyes wide open.
Now, how about your loyal customers? Because I know places where I like to go, and I'm like, God, I really wish it could get back to the way it was. And all my friends are saying, gosh, I wish we could go there again. And they changed it. And how about your loyal? Because you have to have a lot of loyal customers in your type business. What are your loyal customers saying to you?
They're coming in all the time. We've got a huge and loyal fan base who understands and appreciates our commitment to paying workers a good wage and also pushing back against unreasonable regulations and restrictions, if you will. What I saw come out of this pandemic was while there's 20% people who were very negative about how I was pushing back on the governor, but the overwhelming majority were in support of it, and there was a silent majority there too. In addition to a lot of restaurant owners in the state of California who are reaching out to me privately and saying, "Hey, thank you so much for being a voice of reason on this. I can't say anything for fear of losing our customer base because they're uber liberal or what have you. But thank you for being a voice of reason." So I think that it's been a net positive, and you just got to be honest and authentic to yourself and to your business. And that's the advice I give everybody.
Now, let me ask you this question without getting too deep into the weeds. Obviously with the high unemployment, and again, the unemployment piece on the federal level, that stops in September. Now there'll still be unemployment, but the added extra amount stops in September. Now with you having to raise these wages to a certain level, and we're not going to debate the right, wrong, or indifferent, just the pure economics of supply and demand right now. Are you able to get enough people hired to operate your businesses, or are you having to take a lot more time being, the chief cook and bottle washer as the owner of the business?
Yeah, both. And what we're ultimately going to have to do is increase prices, and we're going to have to decrease the units of labor, right? So if I have 5 people making $50,000 a year now, and it just financially doesn't work, and we have to increase the prices, we might have to have 4 people making $50,000 a year. Not saying that we're going to give everybody an additional 20% worth of labor. We might have to automate some of our processes and procedures. We might have to co-pack, outsource, et cetera, in order to make it work. It would be very unfair of me to decrease people's wages. I firmly do believe in a high-paid workforce because I think there's loyalty, less turnover. I think it's a good principle to have. The difference between myself and perhaps somebody who argues on behalf of living wages, I don't think that it should come down from the government. I think it should be the business's decision to make that. Because look, if Bob's next door wants to pay his employees $5 an hour and I'm going to pay mine $20 an hour, well, then they should all work for me.
Right. Of course, they will.
Yeah.
Well, sticking along those lines now, are you fully staffed right now, or how short are you right now on the restaurants, not the franchise stuff, but the stuff you own that you're responsible for? How is it right now? Are you 80%, 70%?
About 80%. We're about 80% staffed. I mean, I'm still in the restaurants day in and day out. I mean, I work 12, 16 hours a day here with my kids, my wife, you name it, but perhaps it's an addiction.
There's no escape. I mean, you're with everybody the whole time.
This is my version of an escape room, and I'm losing.
Folks, you're getting it from, and the reason we're sticking on this theme a little bit here, you hear all kind of stories in mainstream media, but when you come to this show, you're going to get the real story. And I'm real happy. I mean, listen, Andrew, this is great, which is why I'm sticking on the topic, because so many people have an interest in it. Because Everybody knows their favorite local places to go. Okay. And some people may go every week. Some people may go once a month. Some people may see you once a year, but you know your customers. And I'm sure that they're thrilled that things are starting to get back. I mean, Fauci came out today and now they said, well, if you've been vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask inside anymore. Now, what's the policies at your place? Do you have to wear a mask when you come in and you take it off? Or, I mean, what are the rules in California right now?
Masks for us, well, at our business, our team members wear masks because they want to, right? And
Sure.
it's not my place to put my personal beliefs on the team members. We are a team and we're only as good as our lowest rung. So everybody really wants the masks in place. So we have abided by that. Now it's optional whether you wear a mask as a guest based upon the CDC guidance. But look, the masks have been this point of debate / anger / violence in some cases. And it's really unnecessary because it's divided people. I keep talking about that over and over again, but I will bring this up. So airlines and being on airplanes was totally cool this whole time. Like no issues, no transmission on airplanes or any of that. You can be piled on top of one another. You can eat, you can take your mask off, you can put it back on. You can, the HEPA filters turn off, but you're all good. Don't worry. But yet I couldn't open and operate as a restaurant, right? Now you don't have to wear the mask in a restaurant, but because an airplane is more dangerous now, you have to wear a mask. Well, then why the heck were we closed the whole time and the airplanes were open?
I believe me, having someone who's been in restaurants, flown all over the country multiple times, it was a really different experience because in some airlines, they didn't sell the middle seat. So, if you had an aisle or window, you're okay. And then other flights were packed. I mean, sometimes you'd be eating, take your mask off and everything would be cool. And there was other flights where you felt like, the Gestapo was on you. Sir, put that mask back on.
Yep.
I just took a bite. Give me 10 seconds. I mean, that's how it worked.
Yep. And that's what I've been saying all along is that there's no consistency to any of this. So don't get me wrong. I'm elated that now they're reducing these restrictions and you don't have to wear the mask. But I just find it so fascinating now how it's changed. Now you got to wear them on the airplane, but you don't wear them in the restaurants.
It's strange to have things change. Let me ask you this. Okay. Speaking of politics and Governor Newsom, obviously he's going through a recall in California that has been certified. It looks like, there is going to be a recall election. He's still got to be the favorite to remain governor. But the fact is, there is going to be another election. When is that coming up, Andrew? Is that November? Will that be when his election will be? Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing things about more stimulus checks possibly going out in the state of California.
Yeah, well, there's a budget surplus right now, which is scary because why the heck would you have a budget surplus in the middle of a pandemic where every single business is going under? So that's not something to brag about, but they're talking about using the budget surplus in order to redistribute to those families that are in need, which great. I mean, feel free. The state of California votes for that, allow them to do that. But I just think that it's very curious, especially when you dig into the detail and the majority of that surplus came from federal money.
Yeah, that's from the last stimulus package.
And look, let's be honest with ourselves. If you're facing a recall, what are you going to do? You're going to give money out.
Give as much out as you shovel it out as fast as you can get it out. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I tell you what, you are a success story in this business. You're a hero to many people. And the fact that you're coming on this show and others talking about, hey, what's really going on out in the marketplace, I got to tell you, it's a breath of fresh air. Let me touch on some other subjects with you here. And you alluded to this about having to raise prices. The producer price index came out today, 6.2%. The CPI came out the other day, 0.8%. I mean, you've got inflation running at the highest level on the producer side since we've been keeping records dating back to 2010. Is some of your costs, obviously for everything you buy that you sell in a restaurant, on a producer level, how much is that affecting you?
Oh, our prices are skyrocketing, upwards of 30 to 40% raw costs. I mean, commodities are up, specialty products are up, distribution is up, freight is up, gas is up, you name it. So even if a commodity index hasn't gone up on its raw cost price, you're seeing those prices and those increases distilled just on freight alone, right? You see, it's a very integrated supply chain in the sense that one thing goes up, they all go up. There's equal and, not necessarily opposite, but equal reactions as you go through that chain of custody. So chicken, way up right now. Lobster, way up right now. But then furthermore, the people driving the trucks can't find labor, so their wages are going up. The people who are distributing the food from the truck to the restaurant, i.e., well, they're also driving trucks, their prices are going up because they can't find labor. You see, it affects everything, all the way back to the processor and the chicken facility. This is inflation. To suggest that it's not and that it's a temporary blip in the system is to ignore the reality of basic macroeconomics.
Well, Federal Reserve Chairman Powell and some of the other Fed governors, they seem to think, oh no, we can control inflation. It's not a problem. Look, I'm old enough to remember what it was like in the 70s and 80s. And we had to have Paul Volcker come in. We had folks today, people are worried about the 10-year treasury going to 2%. It's currently around 168, 169. I was around when it was 16%, and Volcker had to raise, remember the old days of the prime rate increases?
Yep, Volcker was known for breaking the back of inflation.
Right, and we're just coming in. Everything you just described from a producer price index, that's a right. Actually, the numbers you described are way higher than the 6.2%.
Yeah, well, we're going to see things differently on the ground here. You see, because by the time the data hits all of the fatheads, then it's it's different data. Trust me, we're boots on the ground here. This is what we're seeing now. I don't necessarily fault, Powell and the administration too much for not taking a knee-jerk reaction, because I think that they're afraid of what effect that's going to have on the markets when they start to speak one way or the other and it starts to become hyperbolic or sensationalized. So kudos to them for maintaining some level of calm, but let's also start to face reality and get ready for it to say, look, yes, there might be some inflation. We might hedge against it with the following measures and mechanisms, because the type of quantitative easing we're seeing right now is it's like no other. I mean, $2 trillion being just ching, 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 ching. Wow. It's unbelievable.
Well, take the $2 trillion that you're referring to that was just recently passed. Okay, that put a lot of money in people's pockets, state and local governments balancing these budgets, surpluses. Add in the $150 billion a month the Federal Reserve has been used to buying bonds. Now, look, in 2020, folks, no one criticized anyone because it was, I remember back March, April, May last year, I mean, people were frightened. They didn't know what the hell was going on. And back then, it was a Republican administration that had a damn good Secretary of Treasury and a good federal, Powell was running the Fed, Steve Mnuchin, Treasury Secretary, and they came up with all kind of emergency measures working with Congress. And I remember back then, bills were passing the Senate like 98-1 and overwhelming in the House. And then as it went along and we realized where we were, things changed. But now what you're describing, Andrew, okay, the Fed's continuing to pump the 150 billion and we just spent another 2 trillion. And now the president he's indicating he may agree to scroll back some of his ambitious agenda. But if you throw another couple $1 trillion onto what we've already done, and this inflation number, there's no way a Fed can control that. If you're throwing dollars like that, that could end up having a spiraling effect. And at the end of the day, doesn't it hurt the people on the low end of the totem pole the most?
Of course it does. Of course it does. There's going to be a disparity there. I mean, we see it, right? Eliminate the middle class. The rich get richer. The poor get poorer. We all know the cliche. The rich in this case are the elites and the corporate, corporate America, where they've merged with the government. And the middle class being wiped out is who knows what's going to happen. But the bigger piece to that, too, is the fact that we're shipping our innovation offshore, is we're not creating environments here in the United States whereby we are the chief innovator by crushing these small businesses, which traditionally are the avenues by which we innovate. And then those businesses get bought up by the bigger corporations. But the reason the corporations buy them is for their IP, for their innovation, for their flexibility. I work in a world of seafood, and right now aquaculture is the forefront of seafood. We are the only country in the world where we do not have the framework for an open ocean aquaculture policy as put forth by the National Marine Fisheries Service. So what are we doing? We're shipping it all to Mexico. We're shipping it all to China. You cross the border in Mexico, every American company has sold their IP to Mexico in order to farm offshore all the fin fish, all of the products, which are then shipped back into the United States.
And that costs more coming back into the United States, doesn't
Well,
it?
of course. I mean, yeah, without even getting into the granular numbers, I mean, just the principle, the inefficiency of taking that, shipping it over, shipping it back. It's like the Wild Pacific albacore tuna fishing fleet, right? Beautiful tuna. We catch it all here on the West Coast. We ship it to China. They package it, can it in China, and then ship it back to us.
Unbelievable. Folks, I mean, I cannot tell you how much I'm enjoying this conversation, Andrew. And I know our audience is too, because you're shedding light on stuff that, it's one thing to hear from a talking head, whether it's a liberal network or a conservative network doing their analysis, but to hear from a guy that owns the business like you are, spelling it out in just like really clear language, again, very impressive. Let me ask you this, going back to what you had just said. Okay, your production costs are going up, your labor costs are going up, you're going to have to raise your prices. Where's the break even? I mean, because you have to operate at a profit. You're not going to operate at a loss. You're not like Darden Restaurants or one of the big, chains that can go to the market and borrow money. I'm just economically saying, you've got a tough nut on your hands here to be able to meet the production cost, all the rules, the regulations, dealing with the various things with costs going up, and you got to raise your prices. You got to keep some pretty loyal patrons to be able to be successful in this type of environment.
Well, so how are we going to do it? The answer is scale, right? That's the model is built to scale, because if you're hitting 1 to 2 points bottom line, how do you turn that into something? Scale, right? That's how it's done. But what does that do? We talked about driving out the middle class. That gets rid of all the one-off independent mom and pop operators. So when we joke, you go back and you watch Demolition Man and they talk about having a Taco Bell on every corner. That's what they're talking about, right? I'm looking right now at building new concepts, new one-offs, new independents. I'm not using a traditional restaurant model. I'm thinking, okay, what are the ways in which I can package and digitize this concept to ultimately scale in the absence of the human element, because the human element is unpredictable. And that's the future of restaurants if you're starting off as a one-off. So it's significantly and fundamentally going to change the look, the flavor, the charm, the feel of Main Street. And it is going to give major corporations with cash on the balance sheet opportunities to take over large swaths of various industries, specifically the restaurant industry.
Wow, boy, and we've got to keep small businessmen like yourself. That is so critical. A topic of over the pandemic. Did you guys do takeout? Did you use the old, the DoorDashes, the Uber Eats, whatever? I mean, talk about to our audience how that aspect of your business, because I know that was a new phenomenon during the pandemic where, takeout, picking it up at the restaurant and then having deliveries to people's house. Is that a changing thing? Is that going to stay with us on a go-forward basis? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's an unfortunate reality of this post-pandemic conditioning. So originally these third-party apps were nothing more than avenues by which the Uber and DoorDash, et cetera, they could kind of increase revenue. Uber specifically with like Uber Eats, and DoorDash ultimately creating it as their main avenue of revenue. But the point being is for restaurants, they were 1-2% of sales going into the pandemic. They were always written off. You ask any restaurateur from 100 units to 1 unit, they wrote off the cost associated with doing this as a marketing cost, because you're garnering new business, hopefully, by doing this third-party delivery. Well, now it's become 30 to 40% of sales. Right. And it's not feasible financially because they take 30 cents on every dollar. So if you're giving up 30% of your net on 30 to 40% of sales, then you are exacerbating your bankruptcy, your loss, your demise. And everyone has said, oh, just pivot, make third-party delivery the standard. Well, first of all, it doesn't just come with the cost of delivery, it comes with the cost of packaging. Second of all, the third-party delivery apps don't allow you to mark street prices up. So you can't mark it up in order to absorb that 30%. And also you're getting a lackluster product that's perhaps sat in some guy's glove compartment for 30 minutes.
Right.
Now the standard, because DoorDash and Uber Eats isn't profitable, which is crazy.
Yeah, they're not. For our audience, explain that neither one of these companies are profitable.
Nope, these companies are not profitable, and their sales are up 500% because they're not built to be profitable. They're unicorns. They're just ways by which you can aggregate wealth, buy it, sell it. It's a game of hot potato for private equity, and then break it back down again. And it has significantly changed the consumer mindset. There's waste associated with all of this packaging. It's incredibly unsustainable. And look, I'll totally join the worker side of this one and say Uber Eats, DoorDash, all these Silicon Valley companies, they treat these freelance drivers like crap. Restaurants should have their own delivery platforms. They should be able to have a open highway, pun intended, whereby they can operate without the stifling regulations. And then they should be able to, work that through their local communities to give consumers good food in a quick manner. They can give people more jobs, and they can do it where you don't have to give 30 cents up on every single dollar. But the ways in which these massive corporations work with these local cities is that they prevent competition. I mean, talk about monopoly.
Yeah, what you just described there, I'm quite familiar with. I mean, being as we're involved in the markets a lot, these companies, DoorDash, now we're not picking on DoorDash, of course, but their stock trades over $120 a share, and they lose money. They've never made money. Uber Eats loses money, and that some of these valuations at a certain point in time, Andrew, my belief is these things will come crashing back because it's already starting to happen. I mean, investors are demanding companies that are profitable, dividends, cash flow, and some of these Silicon Valley companies, I don't want to call them startups because they're certainly not startups, but they're having a major impact all across the country on businesses like yours. And frankly, some of it's not so positive. And the general public really doesn't have a sense. They're like, hey, wait a second, I ordered my food, I got my food, okay, pandemic. But now I gotta believe most people, as more people get vaccinated, Fauci opened up like he did today, I think things may start to come back. How do you see this one on a fully rebounding basis? Will people go back to the way it, quote, used to be?
Yeah, I do think that our actions will, but I do remember, I go back to this behavioral conditioning. It's going to take years to uncondition, to unwind the mindset that A, restaurants are dangerous, B, restaurant owners are profit hungry assholes. Sorry for my language.
Yeah,
and C, that it's not more convenient to order through a third-party delivery app. I mean, once again, I go back to that conditioning. And the irony to all of this is that we do these things originally because we think they save time, right? The fax machine, the telephone, etc. But they don't. They don't actually give us time to relax and be with our family and our friends and our kids and enjoy life and family. Instead, it's just the rat race just picks up at a quicker pace, drives us into these social media compartments where we yell at each other, we yell past each other, we build and generate hate, and then we have these divisive communities. I mean, it's truly a scary year that we've seen from the pandemic to the effect that it's had on humanity.
It's had a lot of exposure, hasn't it, Andrew? I mean, the things you're just describing there, our country's more divided now than any time in my lifetime. I mean, and I think it's because people, they don't get out of their comfort zone. I mean, we encourage people who watch our show, look, don't just watch our show, watch different opinion. I mean, we're a conservative leaning show. Everybody knows it. We don't make any bones about it. That's what we believe in. But we don't tell everybody, just stay and watch one thing only on that. Get a broad view of things. Maybe try to broaden yourself, talk to people who you don't necessarily agree with, and try to have a dialogue. Guess what? If you do that, you may learn some things. Let me shift on another topic here. I'm not trying to pick on issues, but the fact is there are a lot of tough things out there, and I'm gonna have one more tough one, then I'm gonna get on some good stuff. Gasoline prices. You know, here in California, when I tell people back east, hey, we're already paying $4.50 a gallon here, and they're like, what? You know, because back east and east of Colorado, most of the time it's under $3. We haven't even hit our summer season here where they changed the blends and you pay a higher price in the summer. Again, how is that affecting business? If we see $5 a gallon gas in California because of rules, regulations, climate change, Green New Deal, et cetera, isn't that going to add just more burden on the average person? I mean, I'm thinking about what they would for some of the people that voted for Joe Biden, who were we'll call them the soccer moms for argument's sake, or the people in the suburbs that did it. Did you plan on voting for him knowing you were going to have your taxes go up? There was going to be lines at gas stations. You're going to get gas. You might be paying $5 a gallon in California. Your kids couldn't stay in school. I mean, Andrew, talk to me about this. I mean, this plays into the mix a little bit, because if people pay $5 a gallon for gas, they're going to cut out somewhere. So
yeah. Look, and I'm no expert on oil futures, gas prices, etc. But what I am an expert on is listening to people, customers, everyday guests who come into my restaurant, and I have no idea what their political leanings are, and I just listen to what they have to say. And I can tell you this: a lot of people did vote for this, and they are okay with this, right? And I'm in California, and I'm totally fine with that. I personally am okay as well with the idea of allowing environmental awareness to be a pillar in the ways in which we make decisions, right? I'm not sensationalizing the environmental debate or conversation. I'm just saying that there is a lot of waste in our world, right? In general, I'm a chef, so I'm trained to mitigate against waste. But we can't put the cart ahead of the horse, pun intended, of course, because we want to feel good about making a decision in an absence of a realistic solution or alternative. Now, bringing that back to reality, if we are going to put policy in place right now, which is going to jack up the prices of gasoline because we're trying to get it out of our system, carbon, etc., and we're trying to move towards more renewable, right, energy, well, let's have a public transportation system in place before we do that. Let's have alternatives in place before we do that, because all we're doing now is we're virtue signaling and then screwing ourselves over. Because California has the worst public transportation system in probably the United States. So you're saying, okay, look, we want to decrease our usage of cars, et cetera. Carpool lanes are empty. And they're like, oh, and by the way, we're going to put these policies in place, and it's all going to go through a gas tax, so people drive less, they use less gas, screw the gas guzzlers, et cetera. Oh, whoop, by the way, Amtrak is shut down. No trains, no public transportation, no high-speed rail. We don't have the money to do it anyway. It doesn't make sense to me.
Right. Now, I listen, full disclosure, I've talked about this. I have in-depth conversation with my sister, who's a big wheel at the Department of Transportation. And she's told me, she says, Mark, again, we did stuff. It doesn't matter whether you're Republican, Democrat, Trump administration, Biden, we had our plate full. Now with the Biden administration, we have it really full, because they're shoving projects at us at a rate that she's never seen before. I mean, I said, Sherry, DOT's like at the epicenter of everything. She goes, you have no idea. It says, we have people clamoring all across the country. How do we do this? How do we do this? All this money's coming out. We want to build this. We want to build that. It's not only the contractors that are going to build this stuff, but the city planners, the engineers. Folks, when they say shovel ready, believe me, this stuff, it's not shovel ready. It takes time to do exactly, Andrew, what you're advocating right here. I just think, be honest with you, again, I thoroughly agree with your analysis. Look, it's like what Michael Jordan said. He says, hey, Republicans buy sneakers too. Okay, people that go to your restaurant, Democrat, Republican, Independent, or non-affiliation, you're going to serve them all because they're your customers. Where I get a little bit ticked off is when Jennifer Granholm, Secretary of Energy, comes out today, and think about this, folks. Sometimes they accuse Republicans of being tone deaf. Here you got people, gas lines in 8 or 9 southern states, and North Carolina, 70% of the gas is that gas stations don't have it. And her reply is, well, we're working on it, but if they had electric cars, they wouldn't be having this problem. I mean, if you're the guy sitting in line and you hear this, man, you could fry an egg on the guy's shoulder. What say you about that, Andrew?
I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree with you more. But I will say this, right? Like, that's politics, Does it surprise you at all?
No, it doesn't.
If you're a professor in PR and you're sitting in a room pointing towards the press secretary, like, you're giving her an A+. She just spun, into a diamond. And I don't agree with it, but I'm aware, I understand it, right? And
Sure.
when you say shovel-ready jobs, you know the only thing they're going to be shoveling.
Yeah, I'm aware of what it's going to be. Look, I mean, folks, we're shedding this light on because this is real life stuff, real things happening. And I love it. Andrew, he can talk about all these issues. He's got a smile on his face. And I got to tell you, this is so much fun. But okay, look, we've talked about a lot of difficult things. Let's talk about some good things. Jobless claims hit a new low today, 473,000. And people might say, 473,000. Yes, folks, that's the lowest since the pandemic started, which means more people are going back to work. So I really think, taking an optimistic view, Andrew, okay, the unemployment, the $300 federal piece, that's going to end in September. You know, I think by the time September comes around, most people are going to say, hey, listen, my unemployment's running out. It may even happen like in August, September. I think Americans, as a rule, they want to work. The old myth of people staying on unemployment, that's not the case. I don't believe in it. I mean, yeah, a certain percentage, yeah, they're going to do it. But I think we still live in a work environment. Pick up your boots, get to work, have a job, the self-esteem that comes with it. Because look, pre-pandemic, our unemployment rate was under 4%. And I think we're going to get back there again. What are your thoughts on this? Because if that happens, despite all these issues that we've talked about, your business can thrive in that environment if we get that unemployment rate down and you'll have plenty of employees.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think that there's a lot of negatives that are painted on the workforce, and in these debates, it's a lot of kind of attempted gotchas. But you are right. By and large, everybody wants to work. It's like what I talk about with my managers. I say, just remember, none of our employees wake up in the morning and say, "Hey, I'm going to do a really bad job today," right? You know, nobody wants to do poorly. Yes, we make mistakes and sometimes our emotions take over and we compound mistakes on a day-to-day basis, but that's not anyone's intention, right? And I always am one to give the benefit of the doubt. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. These are very flash in the pan conversations and topics that are going to, really, really antagonize each extreme. But I think that what we're going to see is we're going to see a lot of changes, but on a state by state basis. And we are seeing these mass kind of exodus situations from one state to another. And I think that it's giving our states a lot of opportunity to market themselves as, hey, you want to come here? Look at Florida. I mean, you know, DeSantis, is he working for it's like he is a billboard for the state of Florida. He's probably done so much more than the Office of Tourism ever did, right?
No question about it. I mean, I was down there for 3
You look at
months.
Newsom.
Yeah.
You know, he's losing Senate seats because people are leaving his state. So I think we're really going to start to see the ways in which states under this system are able to step up and become independent and individual. And let's just hope, you know, and I don't want to throw a negative out there, let's just hope we don't see, coming off this pandemic, fundamental changes to the system, things like packing the Supreme Court and overturning massive precedents that have been set on a judicial basis that could alter the trajectory of the country. Because we have to remember, we are a constitutional republic, and there's certain things I think people forget about that.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because we got a few minutes left in the show. But I always talk about this prior to those Georgia elections. You know, had we won one of those Senate seats, a lot of this bad legislation coming through now, it would be dead on arrival. It wouldn't happen, but we didn't. And we got a 50. Look, our country used to be center right. I don't think it's center right anymore. I think it's center because, you know, you've got the 20% on the left, the hardcore leftists, they're winning right now in the Democratic Party. Maybe you got 20% on the right that push the far right, but 60s, maybe 60, 70%, my opinion, of the American public are somewhere between center left and center right.
Yeah.
You know, they want to go to work, they want to have a good job, they want safety, they want to educate their kids, have a place to live. So, you know, if you can do that for them, I feel they're going to be happy. Okay. And, you know, the way things have been going on some of these things, you got to step back sometimes and say, well, wait a minute here. You know, nobody campaigned on packing the court. DC stated some of this, you know, the far left wanted it, but to his credit, okay, Biden has tried. I mean, he's talking like a centrist, but unfortunately his policies have really been towards that far left wing of the base of the Democratic Party. But I've got to believe, based upon the protocols in the Senate. You know, you've got Senator Manchin, Senator Sinema, who have said they are not going to do away with the filibuster. Now, to show you how close what you just warned about, you know, we've got 2022 midterms coming up, okay? I happen to personally believe it's going to be a rout in the House because some of these administration policies, if they continue governing to the far left with redistricting, retirements of many Democratic congressmen, and just the sheer velocity of people voting in the opposing party and what traditionally happens in midterm, Andrew, I think there's a very good chance the House flips in 2022, despite all the stuff the media is making. You know, you listen to the media, you think Liz Cheney's the second coming of Christ, for goodness sake. I also
a hell of a distraction.
A total distraction. I mean, I don't. Another issue for another show later on. But the point being is, then you have the Senate, and the Senate is 50-50 right now. You know, if we were 2 seats down, a lot of these bad policies could be coming to fruition, like hacking the court, changing election laws, DC statehood. I mean, some of these folks, these laws passed in the House of Representatives narrowly. Thank goodness we have a system in a constitutional republic where we do have a more deliberative body like the Senate. But the things you warned about there, we're not that far away from them. But fortunately, I think the American public are going to look at this and say, wait a second. I thought Joe Biden was going to be a moderate. Close it out for us on your thoughts, where the country's going. I know you got a positive outlook because as a business owner, Andrew, you've got to have a positive outlook. What are your thoughts?
I think that the one thing that I saw was unity against corporate America, okay? When people started getting mad at the Amazons and the Targets and the Walmarts of the world, I saw right and left come together to try and support small business for a hot minute. And that's a good thing because the corporatocracy, where we've seen this merge of corporations and government into a much larger behemoth, is scary to me, especially when the backbone of the economy and the backbone of the culture in America is about innovation, entrepreneurship, family, community, all those great principles. Those come from independent business owners. Those come from independent communities. If we get rid of that, then we start to lose all of that flavor. I don't think we're going to. I think that we are going to start to see a bit of a decentralization moving forward. The ways in which that breaks down into policy, once again, I'm just a dishwasher, but I think on the food side, it would be really good to start to see a lot of local food communities pop up. I think it would be good to start to see a decentralization of our food system. I think that's going to have an effect on the healthfulness of our food. Some of the underlying pandemics, which are obesity and the crap that we put into our bodies. Nobody's been talking about that, of course. I'm just shocked that Big Pharma became the hero of 2021. But I think we'll get away from some of that and probably normalize. So those are my general thoughts.
Well, I got to tell you something, Andrew. If someone wants to go to your webpage or learn more about your business, your restaurant, where do they go? How can they find out more about you?
Well, first and foremost, just follow me on Twitter at Chef Gruel. That is my my microphone. I'm very active there. If you want straight food porn, go to my Instagram, which is at Andrew Gruel. Or for more information, go to my website, chefgruel.com.
Oh, that's great. Well, I got to tell you something. I had so much fun doing the show with you today, Andrew.
Likewise.
I mean, you are going to become a frequent guest here. I want you to come back as often as Liz will book you. And folks, I mean, you heard it from the horse's mouth today, literally from a business owner who's a straight shooter, stand-up guy, doing everything he can to raise his wages for his employees, put out a good product, comply with regulations, franchise, grow his business. Andrew, you're an American success story, and I wish you all the best. And I thank you for being our guest today.
Thank you so much for having me and the kind words. I appreciate it.
Folks, again, it's been a great week. We've talked about a lot of things. We will be back on Monday. I'm sure there's going to be hot topics over the weekend. Maybe we can get back on some serious things focusing on the United States of America. I know there's issues out there. We didn't even talk about the foreign issues going on today. You know what they are. That's not getting any better. But good news is they give us great news on the mask today. More people are getting vaccinated. The cases are going down. And it looks like the country's on track to get back to some sense of normalcy this summer. So again, Andrew, thanks again. Thanks for our audience for viewing us. We appreciate all of you, much to the success of the show. Have a great weekend, and we will see you on Monday.
Thank you.
I love this land.